Hey, everyone. I never thought I'd be the guy to spill my guts on a forum like this, but I honestly don't know where else to turn. Maybe writing it out will help me make sense of it all, or at least give me some clarity. My name's Mark, and I'm 36. I've been married to Amanda for 10 years. We have two incredible kids, Lily, 8, and Jack, 5, who are the lights of my life. To anyone looking in from the outside, we've got the picture-perfect life. But you know what they say, appearances can be deceiving. Let me take you back a bit, to when Amanda and I first met. It was a classic story, really. We were introduced at a mutual friend's barbecue. She was this whirlwind of energy, all bright smiles and witty comebacks. I was hooked almost instantly. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, you know. I'd never met anyone so magnetic, so alive. A year later, we were married. Everything felt right, like we were building something solid, something that could withstand anything. For a long time, it was great. I mean, really great. Amanda stayed home to raise Lily and Jack while I worked in IT. She was an amazing mom, attentive, patient, and always going the extra mile to make their childhood magical. She baked cupcakes for every school event, planned themed birthday parties, and made scrapbooks documenting every milestone. Meanwhile, I did my best to provide for us, working long hours to make sure Amanda didn't have to worry about money. I thought we were a team. But lately, things have been off. It's hard to pinpoint when it started, but the change in Amanda was subtle at first. Little things. She began going out more often, always with vague explanations. Just running an errand, she'd say, or, I need a little time to myself. Which, sure, I get, being a stay-at-home mom is no walk in the park. But her errands started becoming more frequent and taking longer. She'd leave after dinner and come back hours later, always with some generic excuse like she lost track of time. Then there was her appearance. Amanda's always been beautiful, but she suddenly seemed obsessed with looking good, like, really good. She bought new clothes, expensive makeup, and even started going to the gym regularly. When I joked about it, saying, "Wow, someone's on a mission to turn heads," she laughed it off, saying, "Just trying to feel like myself again." Her phone became another point of tension. Amanda was never one to care much about her phone, but now it was practically glued to her hand. If it wasn't in her hand, it was face down on the counter, like she didn't want me seeing her notifications. And God forbid I pick it up to check the time or use it to find the remote, she'd snatch it away like it was a live grenade. She claimed it was because she was planning a surprise for me, but months went by, and I never saw anything resembling a surprise. At first, I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Marriage is a marathon, right? People change, life gets stressful, and sometimes you just need to ride out the rough patches. So, I doubled down on trying to be a better husband. I offered to take the kids so Amanda could have a spa day. I planned date nights, complete with babysitters in her favorite restaurants. I even started getting up earlier on weekends to make her breakfast in bed. But no matter what I did, Amanda seemed distant. Detached, almost. She wasn't rude or cold, she just wasn't present. I told myself it was a phase. Maybe she was feeling overwhelmed or going through something she didn't know how to talk about. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt because, for better or worse, that's what marriage is supposed to be. But deep down, a little voice kept whispering that something wasn't right. The real wake-up call came one Friday night. I just put the kids to bed and settled onto the couch with a beer, flipping through Netflix for something to watch. Amanda came downstairs dressed to the nines, heels, a sleek black dress, hair done up like she was going to a gala. "Where are you off to?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Just meeting some of the moms from Jack's school," she said casually, grabbing her purse. "A little girls' night." "Oh, that's nice," I replied. "Where are you guys going?" She paused, just for a split second, before rattling off the name of a restaurant I'd never heard of. "It's new," she added quickly. "Don't wait up for me, okay?" As I watched her walk out the door, a knot formed in my stomach. Something didn't add up. Amanda had never mentioned being close to any of the moms at Jack's school, and the way she avoided eye contact when she answered, it felt off. But I didn't say anything. Not that night. The next morning, I casually asked how her night was. Amanda smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It was fine," she said, brushing me off. "No details, no funny anecdotes, nothing. Just fine." And when I suggested we invite some of her mom friends over for a barbecue sometime, she mumbled something about how they're not really the barbecue type. I tried to shake it off, but that little voice in my head was louder now. I started noticing other things, how she'd get defensive if I asked too many questions about her plans, how she always seemed to have some emergency that required her to leave the house, how she'd pull away when I tried to kiss her. It was like she was putting up walls I couldn't see, and no matter how hard I tried to get through to her, she kept shutting me out. Looking back, maybe I didn't want to see what was right in front of me. I wanted to believe in the Amanda I fell in love with, the Amanda who made me laugh until my sides hurt, who cried happy tears when Lily took her first steps, who held my hand through every high and low of the past decade. But that Amanda was slipping away, and I had no idea how to stop it. I was scared for my marriage, scared for my kids, and scared of what I might find if I looked too closely. Because deep down, I already knew. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. It started as an ordinary Tuesday, one of those days that fade into the background of life. I had a client meeting scheduled for the afternoon, but it got cancelled at the last minute. Rather than waste the day sitting at my desk, I decided to head home early. I figured I'd surprise Amanda, maybe take her out for lunch or just spend some time together. It had been a while since we'd had an unscheduled moment to just exist as a couple. I pulled into our driveway and immediately noticed something odd. A bright yellow taxi was parked at the curb. Not an Uber or Lyft, but an old-school cab, the kind you rarely see anymore. And there, leaning against the open passenger side window, was Amanda. She was laughing, her head tilted back, her hair catching the afternoon sun in that way that always used to stop me in my tracks. Except this time, I wasn't admiring her beauty. I was trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The laugh, it wasn't her usual laugh, the one she gives to the kids or me when we're joking around. This was different. Flirty. Almost inviting. My stomach tightened as I watched her reach into the car, her hand brushing against the driver's arm as she said something I couldn't hear. The driver, a rugged guy with salt and pepper stubble and a confident grin, leaned closer. My breath caught when I saw the way his eyes lingered on her. What the hell was going on? I sat there in my car, frozen, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe she knew the guy from somewhere. Maybe it was innocent. But as I watched, Amanda's body language told a different story. She was relaxed, almost glowing, in a way I hadn't seen in months. The knot in my stomach tightened, twisting into something sharp and painful. I must have shifted in my seat because Amanda glanced over her shoulder and spotted me. Her expression changed so quickly it was like a mask snapping into place. She straightened up, waved to the driver, and started walking toward the house as if nothing had happened. The taxi lingered for a moment before pulling away, and I caught a glimpse of the driver looking in his rearview mirror, his smirk unmistakable. "Hey, you're home early," Amanda called, her voice overly cheerful as she reached me. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Meeting got cancelled." "Who was that?" "Oh, just the taxi driver," she replied casually, brushing past me toward the front door. "I needed to run some errands, and the car wouldn't start this morning, so I called a cab." Her explanation was plausible enough, but something about the way she said it, too quick, too rehearsed, set my nerves on edge. I followed her inside, watching as she kicked off her shoes and grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen. She was too calm, like she'd had plenty of practice covering her tracks. That night, after the kids were in bed, I couldn't shake the image of her leaning into that taxi, laughing in a way I hadn't seen her laugh with me in ages. I sat on the couch, staring at the TV but not really watching. Amanda was upstairs, scrolling through her phone, her face lit by the glow of the screen. It felt like there was a wall between us, invisible but impenetrable. The next morning, the same taxi was parked outside our house when I left for work. The driver was leaning against the hood, scrolling on his phone, as if he had all the time in the world. My unease grew. How often was this guy here? Why was Amanda using a taxi when we had two perfectly good cars? I decided to dig a little deeper. At work, I logged into our online phone account and pulled up the call history. My heart sank when I saw the same number repeated over and over. Late-night calls, early morning texts, sometimes just minutes apart. The number didn't belong to anyone I recognized, and a quick reverse lookup confirmed it was unlisted. That evening, while Amanda was in the shower, I made my move. Her phone was sitting on the nightstand, and for once, it wasn't locked. My hands shook as I picked it up, navigating to her messages. A string of texts from the same unknown number stared back at me, their words searing into my brain. I can't wait for our time together tonight. You're the only one who gets me. Missing you already. Wish I could hold you right now. Last night was amazing. You're amazing. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The texts were undeniable, their meaning clear. My wife, the woman I'd built my life with, was having an affair. I put the phone back exactly as I'd found it, my hands still trembling. Amanda emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later, a towel wrapped around her as she hummed to herself. She looked so normal, so familiar, and yet completely alien. I watched her climb into bed, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. For the rest of the night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I replayed every moment of the past few months, searching for signs I'd missed, for clues that might have prepared me for this. But no amount of reflection could change the simple, devastating truth: Amanda was cheating on me. The next morning, the taxi was there again. I watched from the living room window as Amanda walked out, her phone in hand, her face lighting up as she climbed into the passenger seat. The driver, Jake, I later learned, gave her a smile that made my blood boil. That was the moment I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever Amanda thought she was hiding, it was out in the open now. And I wasn't about to sit back and let it destroy everything I'd worked so hard to build. It all came to a head on a Thursday evening. Amanda was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone as the kids played in the living room. I was cleaning up after dinner when she suddenly looked up and said, "Hey, Mark, do you mind if I borrow your car tonight? Mine's acting up again." I froze for a moment, the plate in my hand hovering over the sink. I didn't trust her anymore, not after the texts, not after the taxi, but I didn't want to tip her off that I was onto her. So, I forced a smile and said, "Sure, no problem. Just be careful with it." She flashed me a quick smile, grabbed my keys, and kissed me on the cheek before heading out the door. My stomach churned as I watched her leave. I knew this wasn't about a car problem. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed my phone and opened the rideshare tracker I'd installed weeks ago. It had been a gamble, syncing my car's GPS to my account, but tonight, it was going to pay off. The app showed my car heading downtown, then taking a sharp turn toward the edge of town. When it stopped in front of a rundown motel, my suspicions were confirmed. I didn't waste any time. I told the kids to stay with their grandparents next door, making up a story about needing to run an errand. I got into Amanda's car and drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The anger was building inside me, but beneath it was a deep, throbbing hurt I couldn't ignore. When I pulled into the motel parking lot, there it was, my car, parked casually in the corner like it had every right to be there. My chest tightened as I scanned the lot. It didn't take long to spot the yellow taxi a few spaces away. That was all the confirmation I needed. I parked a short distance away and waited. Minutes ticked by like hours, my pulse hammering in my ears. My mind raced with everything I wanted to say, every question I needed answered. How could she do this? Did she think I wouldn't find out? Was I really that easy to betray? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the motel door opened. Amanda stepped out first, her hair slightly disheveled, a satisfied smile tugging at her lips. Jake followed close behind, adjusting his shirt and running a hand through his hair like he was the star of some cheap romance movie. I stepped out of the car and made my way toward them. Amanda froze when she saw me, her smile vanishing in an instant. Jake stopped too, looking between us with a mix of confusion and annoyance. "Mark," Amanda said, her voice sharp with surprise. "What are you doing here?" I stopped a few feet away, crossing my arms to keep them from shaking. "I could ask you the same thing," I said, my voice low and steady. "What's going on, Amanda?" Her eyes darted to Jake, who didn't seem the least bit concerned. "It's not what it looks like," she said quickly. "Jake and I were just talking." "Talking?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "In a motel room?" "It's work-related," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Jake's helping me with some personal projects. You wouldn't understand." Before I could respond, Jake let out a short laugh. "Work-related? Come on, Amanda. Let's not insult the guy's intelligence." Amanda's face flushed, and she turned to Jake, hissing, "Don't." But Jake wasn't done. He turned to me, shrugging casually. "Mark, she told me you two were splitting up. Said you were living separate lives and it was only a matter of time before you made it official." I stared at him, stunned, before turning back to Amanda. "Is that what you've been telling him? That we're splitting up?" Amanda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No, I mean, he misunderstood. I never said that." Jake smirked, clearly enjoying the show. "Right. I'm just the taxi guy, huh?" My blood boiled at his arrogance, but my anger wasn't solely directed at him. I turned to Amanda, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Why, Amanda? Why would you do this?" She folded her arms, her defensive posture infuriatingly familiar. "Why? Maybe because you've been too busy working to notice me. You're always buried in your laptop or on the phone. When was the last time you actually looked at me, Mark? Made me feel alive?" I blinked at her, stunned. "You're blaming me? For this? For sneaking around behind my back and lying to my face?" Her defiance wavered for a moment, but she didn't back down. "I needed something, Mark. Something you haven't been giving me for years. Jake. Jake makes me feel like I matter." Jake gave a smug nod, as if he were proud of his role in destroying my marriage. That was the breaking point. I took a step closer to him, my voice low and icy. "You should leave. Now." For the first time, Jake looked uneasy. "Look, man, I didn't know." "I said leave," I snapped, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Before I forget, I'm supposed to be the calm one." Jake hesitated for a moment, then backed away. "Fine. She's all yours," he said, smirking one last time before climbing into his taxi and driving off. Amanda stood there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Mark, please," she said, her voice cracking. "Let me explain. I made a mistake, but it doesn't have to end like this." I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, and felt an overwhelming wave of disgust. Not just at her, but at myself, for trusting her, for not seeing this sooner. "You want to explain?" I said, my voice hollow. Explain it to yourself. I'm done. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the motel parking lot. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. She could find her own way home. I don't remember much of the drive home from the motel. My hands were on the wheel, the road stretched out in front of me, but my mind was somewhere else, lost in the wreckage of what had just happened. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I sat there for a long moment, staring at the house. Our house. The place where Amanda and I had built a life together, where we'd raised Lily and Jack, where every wall held a memory. Now, it felt like a cruel facade. I couldn't bring myself to go inside right away. I stayed in the car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. But the moment I closed my eyes, all I could see was her. Amanda, leaning into that taxi window, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. Amanda, standing in the motel parking lot, scrambling to justify the unjustifiable. Amanda, with that look on her face, the one that said she'd already made her choice, long before I ever knew there was a decision to make. I finally went inside, greeted by the muffled sounds of cartoons coming from the living room. My parents were sitting on the couch with the kids, my mom reading a book while my dad helped Jack with a Lego set. Lily looked up as I walked in, her face lighting up with that innocent, unfiltered joy kids have. "Daddy," she said, running to hug me. Her arms wrapped around my waist, and for a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, overwhelmed by the weight of what I was about to put her and Jack through. "How's my princess?" I managed, ruffling her hair. My voice sounded steady, but inside, I was anything but. I thanked my parents for watching the kids and ushered them out quickly, avoiding their concerned glances. They could tell something was wrong, I'm sure of it, but I wasn't ready to explain. Not yet. Not when the words felt so raw and jagged in my throat. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the family photo hanging above the fireplace. It was from last Christmas, Amanda and I in matching sweaters, Lily and Jack grinning ear to ear as they held up their new toys. We looked so happy, so complete. But now, I couldn't look at that photo without wondering how much of it was real. Was Amanda already cheating then? Was she smiling for the camera while secretly planning her next rendezvous? The betrayal hit me in waves, each one stronger than the last. Anger came first, hot, consuming, and blinding. I wanted to smash something, to scream at her, to demand answers she'd probably never give me. How could she do this? After everything we'd been through, how could she throw it all away for some taxi driver? But the anger didn't last. It never does. It was quickly replaced by something colder, heavier, heartbreak. That's what people don't tell you about betrayal. It's not just about the act itself, it's about everything it takes from you. Amanda didn't just cheat on me. She stole our memories, our future, our family. She turned every moment of our marriage into something tainted, something I couldn't trust anymore. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made for her, for us. When Lily was born, I scaled back at work so I could be more present at home. I passed up promotions, settled for smaller raises, all because Amanda said she needed me to balance the load. And I was happy to do it. I wanted to be the husband who put his family first, the dad who never missed a soccer game or a school recital. But now, looking back, I couldn't help but wonder if Amanda had ever appreciated any of it, or if she'd always been waiting for an excuse to chase something else. The thought of our kids tore me apart the most. Lily and Jack didn't deserve this. They didn't ask for parents who couldn't keep it together. And now, because of Amanda's choices, they were going to have to grow up in a fractured family. Holidays would be divided. Birthdays would be split. They'd be shuttled back and forth between two homes, their little lives upended because their mom decided she wasn't satisfied. I pictured telling them, trying to find the words to explain why their world was falling apart. Jack wouldn't understand, he was too young. And Lily. God, Lily would blame herself. She's always been sensitive, always trying to make everyone happy. I could already hear her little voice asking, "Daddy, was it my fault? Did I do something wrong?" The thought brought tears to my eyes, and for the first time since the confrontation, I let myself cry. I cried for my kids, for the innocence they were about to lose. I cried for the man I used to be, the one who believed in Amanda, who trusted her implicitly, who never once doubted that she loved me. And I cried for the life we were supposed to have, the one Amanda shattered with her lies. When the tears finally stopped, I felt hollow. Empty. Like there was nothing left of me but the shell of a man who used to have it all. I wanted to call someone, to talk, to unload all the anger and sadness that was threatening to crush me. But who would I even call? My parents? My friends? How do you tell people that the person you loved most in the world betrayed you? Instead, I sat there in the silence, letting the weight of it all settle over me. This was my life now. Broken. Scattered. Irrevocably changed. As the hours ticked by, a strange clarity began to creep in. I couldn't undo what had happened. I couldn't make Amanda uncheat or unlie. But I could decide what came next. For me. For Lily and Jack. For all the pieces of the life Amanda had destroyed. By the time the sun rose, I'd made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let her ruin me. I wasn't going to let her betrayal define me or my kids' future. I would fight for them, for their stability, for their happiness. Because if Amanda had taught me anything, it was that love isn't just about words or gestures. It's about showing up, every single day, even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. And if she couldn't do that, then I'd do it alone. The morning after the confrontation at the motel, I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending, hoping, or waiting for Amanda to wake up and realize what she'd done. She had made her choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. I called a lawyer first thing. His name was Matt, recommended by a friend who'd been through a rough divorce himself. Matt listened patiently as I laid everything out, the texts, the lies, the motel. When I finished, he sighed and said, "Mark, you need more than just your word if you want to make this as clean as possible. Get hard evidence, especially if you're planning to fight for custody." That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. His name was Ryan Morgan, gruff, no nonsense, and with a reputation for getting results. When I met him at his office, he wasted no time. "I'll get what you need," he said, his voice low and steady. "But you need to be prepared for whatever I find. Sometimes, the truth can hurt worse than the lies." I thought about that for a long moment before nodding. Do whatever it takes. The next week felt like an eternity. I went through the motions of daily life, work, dinner, bedtime stories, but everything felt like it was happening to someone else. Amanda was strangely quiet during this time. She stopped going out in the evenings and started acting overly attentive, asking about my day, making dinner, even suggesting we go on a family outing that weekend. I could see what she was doing: damage control. Maybe she thought she could smooth things over before I made any moves. But I wasn't playing along. When Ryan called, his voice was grim. "Mark, I've got what you need. Can you meet me?" I drove to his office with a mix of dread and determination. Ryan handed me a folder, thick with photos and notes. "She's not even trying to hide it," he said. "She's been meeting him during the day, your car, his taxi. Sometimes at that motel, sometimes just parked somewhere. And this one," he flipped to a photo that made my blood run cold. Amanda and Jake were sitting in the taxi, laughing and kissing, parked right outside Lily's school. "She was supposed to be picking Lily up," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan nodded. "I figured as much. Look, Mark, I know this hurts, but you've got a solid case here. Use it." I left his office feeling both vindicated and shattered. The evidence was damning, no doubt about it. But seeing it laid out so plainly, photo after photo of Amanda betraying me, of her prioritizing her affair over our family, made it all feel painfully real. The next day, I filed for divorce. Matt walked me through every step, from the division of assets to custody arrangements. "You've got strong grounds for full custody," he said. "Her behavior shows a clear lack of judgment, and we can prove she's been neglectful." That night, after Amanda put the kids to bed, I asked her to sit down. I had everything prepared, copies of the evidence, the initial divorce paperwork. She must have sensed what was coming because she looked uneasy as she sat across from me at the dining table. "Amanda," I began, my voice calm but firm, "we need to talk. I know about everything, the texts, the motel, Jake. I've known for a while now." Her face went pale, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to form a response. "Mark, I can explain." "No," I said, cutting her off. "You can't. And honestly, I don't want to hear it anymore. This isn't about fixing anything. It's about moving forward, for me, for the kids. I filed for divorce." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't stop. "I'm also filing for full custody of Lily and Jack. I have evidence that proves your relationship with Jake has interfered with your responsibilities as a parent. This isn't just about us anymore, Amanda. It's about them." She started to cry, her words tumbling out in a mix of apologies and excuses. "Mark, please, I was lost. I didn't mean for this to happen. Don't do this to me." I stood, unable to listen to her anymore. "No, Amanda. You did this to yourself. I'm not going to let your choices destroy our kids' lives." The hardest part came a few days later, when I sat Lily and Jack down to tell them what was happening. I had rehearsed what I would say over and over, trying to find the right balance of honesty and gentleness. In the end, there was no easy way to do it. "Mommy and Daddy aren't going to live in the same house anymore," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my heart broke. "We both love you so much, and that's never going to change. But sometimes, grown-ups have problems they can't fix. This isn't your fault, okay? You didn't do anything wrong." Lily's face crumpled as she tried to hold back tears. "But why, Daddy? Why can't you stay together?" I pulled her into my lap, stroking her hair. "Sometimes, people make mistakes that hurt each other, and it's hard to fix things after that. But I promise, you and Jack are going to be okay. You'll always have a loving home with me." Jack didn't seem to fully understand, but he clung to my arm, his little voice asking, "Will I still see Mommy?" "Of course, buddy," I said, my throat tightening. "You'll still see Mommy. But most of the time, you'll be with me." By the time I finished, Lily was crying softly, and Jack had fallen asleep against my shoulder. I carried them to their rooms, tucking them in with a heaviness in my chest I'd never felt before. As the weeks went by, I focused on rebuilding. I threw myself into being the best dad I could be, making sure Lily and Jack felt loved and supported. Amanda moved out, and while the divorce process was painful, I felt a strange sense of relief knowing I was taking control of my life again. There were still moments when the hurt would sneak up on me, a quiet evening, a memory triggered by a song on the radio, but those moments became less frequent. Slowly, I began to see a future beyond the betrayal, a future where I could be happy again. And through it all, one thing kept me going, my kids. They deserved better. They deserved stability, love, and a parent who would never let them down. And that's exactly what I was going to give them.